welcome to all of you, my all participants who are joining us from all over India. And I'm glad to have, there are few foreign participants joining us from Singapore, Dubai, Dhaka, Doha, Oman, Kabul, etc. And what I get the latest number, we have already crossed 266 participant. So I good to see the so many enthusiastic in GRC. I once again welcome you all. This is Chetan Thakkar. I am your host for the day. Once again, warm welcome to all of you friends. And I must appreciate all of your time and commitment of being on Saturday. You all are being with us. Let me also promise all of you the session what we are going to have, we're going to be, I'm sure, will make it a very insightful, enriching, engaging, and I'm sure each one you will get a lot of bites of the knowledge from our thought leaders who have joined us from a large pharma companies. So friends, a small request to all of you, before we formally kick off our session, I request all of you to have a 1 minute silence. This is a tribute to our dear ones, our friend, relative, who we lost their lives in this pandemic. So request to join with me, all of you, for the next 1 minute as a tribute, a silence to our dear and dear ones. So friends, have a 1 minute silence. Thank you, friends. Thank you, all of you, once again. Once again, welcome to all my dearest participants here today. Friends, we just quickly talked about who are we, what are we going to do, what is the program layout. My dear friend Naval will take you in the greater details on the technical parts, the layout of the program. I will quickly run through about basically we are a chief audit inner circle group, a virtual group, where we have a senior management professionals are part of this group. It's a diversified group. Basically, it is more of the IF fraternity group, where we have persons those who charge with the governance. Yeah, these are the like-minded people. We call TCWG. Those who charge with the governance. Those who are into GRC. We have people in a group from very large to very large companies. Those are head internal audit, chief internal audit, chief risk officers, chief compliance officer, CFOs, audit committee chairman, independent directors, and we have people in our group, very senior people. Those are from Big Four partners are there, from large consulting firm partners are there, and let me tell you, each one of them are individually carrying not less than 20-year experience into GRC. And I'm happy to share that the current strength of the group of the senior professional is 162 as on today. So guys, the collective wisdom of this CA in a circle is not less than 3,000 plus years of wisdom putting together. So that's what we are CA in a circle. And friend, this is first time ever. Yeah, you heard it right. This is first time ever. We will be announcing our program outside the inner circle to the outer. So this is the platform we are coming outside the circle, and we thought let's the benefit of the knowledge what we share, senior among us, let's come to our fellow professionals and let them also be enriched with the knowledge series. So that's the way we came out with this program today. So that's what about, and the group is existence of almost more than 6 years now. And the purpose of the group, we do discuss on the GRC issues, we discuss industry specific issues, benchmarking, the risk happening, the new development, what happens in the profession, any challenges faced. Say recently right now, forensic standard issued by the institute, we are deliberating, discussing, we contribute to the different different institution. We contribute to ICAI, IIA. We have members, council members from various institutions, a part of this group. So this is quite a diversified group of all the those who charge with the governance. So that's all about from my side about the group. So friends, let me have introduce guest speakers today. We have speakers who are experts in subject matter experts with GRC. Those we brought for you to get the knowledge series for you. Those are people from large pharma companies. We have got the leaders from Dr. Reddy. We got the leaders from Glenmark. We got the leaders from Cipla. And we have a dynamic moderator which is coming from Yokogawa. So friends, I will take you through each one a profile quickly. So you all equipped with our think tank knowledge thought leaders. First of all, welcome Anisha ji Udeshi. Welcome Anisha ji. Anisha ji is a subject matter expert in risk and insurance. Anisha ji is right now working as a senior director global insurance and risk management at Cipla Limited at head office Mumbai. Yeah, Anisha ji is around 32 years of experience, which include 30 years at Cipla since 1990. Almost more than 30 years she is associated with Cipla and handling global role in insurance and risk management. As a professionally, she is LLB batch 1987. She had done the risk management for IIM UK Institute. She has done her diplomas in cyber law. She is experts and specialization in insurance. And her apart from insurance being a risk transfer strategy, she is involved in company operational risk management actively. So we welcome Anisha ji on the board. Welcome to Anisha ji. So she is our today's expert in risk and insurance. Now coming to our second, welcome Anisha ji, welcome on the board. We would look forward to hear a lot of insights from you. Friends, please welcome Seema Grover. Seema Grover is a global chief internal auditor at Dr. Reddy at the head office, Hyderabad. She is with 20 years of experience in audit and assurance. And let me tell you, friends, she is more than 16 years associated with Dr. Reddy since 2004 at the Hyderabad office. Seema is as a professional academics. She is a chartered accountant, 2000 batch. She has done her GDPR and privacy laws from British Standard Institute. She is a very passionate audit and assurance veteran in the pharma industry. In her role of last 16 years, she had worked in a various role in Dr. Reddy. She was in corporate controlling. She had done SAP implementation. She was a part of planning. She was a business finance. She was a part of corporate finance. She was involved in merger acquisition. She was actively involved in digitalization. She was involved in integration approach, a very unique approach, integration approach of assurance with the other key business function. She was instrumental for that implementation. And before she took over as a global chief auditor, she was a finance director with the Dr. Reddy, and so she is our think tank of audit and assurance for today's session. Welcome, Seema. Welcome to the session. We look forward to a great insight from you. Welcome.
Thank you, Chetan. Thank you.
Thank you. And friends, let me introduce our third speaker, Tejas Shah. Tejas is a subject expert in ethics and compliance. So friends, I have introduced, we bought a program where we got the best of the GRC professional. So Anisha is expert on risk and insurance. Seema is expert on audit and assurance. And we got Tejas for you, Tejas Shah. He is expert in forensic ethics and compliance. So welcome Tejas. Tejas is in qualified chartered accountant 2004 batch. He is a CISA from US. He is a certified fraud examiner from US. He is the certified internal audit from US. And Tejas has done his MDP and from XLRI as an executive course. And Tejas is working as a vice president head risk compliance, ethics and compliance with Glenmark Pharma, one of the again reputed large Indian pharma. Since last 1 year, he is putting together almost close to 18 years. Before Glenmark, he was associated with Watson Pharma, again a US-based, one of the large pharma company. and he bring with a lot of experience on ethics, forensic, compliance. His major strength is basically he has hands-on experience on anti-bribery, anti-corruption, FCPA, US, UK bribery, and other than that, he is expert in SOX, audit, and assurance. So Tejas is our expert, subject matter expert, a think tank in ethics and compliance. Welcome Tejas, welcome on the board for today's session. We heartily welcome you and look forward a great insight for my all colleagues who have joined you for the session today. Welcome Tejas.
Thanks Chetan, thanks for nice introduction.
Thank you so much. And now none other than our last, most young, dynamic, and my good friend of mine, Naval Kishore Bajaj. He is going to moderate our today's program. A very smart intern auditor. He is a chartered accountant, 2008 batch. He is a CISA. He has done CIA, and he is a forensic auditor from Institute. Right now, Naval is working as head audit and assurance based out at Bangalore, working for a large Japanese company known as Yokogawa Limited. Naval also brings almost more than 15 years experience. His core area, he is our think tank from audit and assurance again. He is handling this Japanese company's audit and assurance based out at Bangalore, and he was associated earlier with a large automobile company like Honda Cars, Honda Cars. He was associated with the big fours like PwC, and he spent 5 to 6 years of very large IT company, Sopra Steria. So his role is assurance, audit, SOX, IFC. And let me tell you friends, being Naval is associated with the Institute quite for some time. He was a part of knowledge, as a knowledge member at Institute Intern Audit Standard Board. In past, he helped Institute in drawing the intern audit standards. Currently, I'm sure Naval is working on the forensic standard which issued by Institute just couple of weeks before. So he's helping Institute to review those standards, so we get the best standards on forensic. And one more last thing about Naval, very interesting. Naval is right now president with BVSS, which is a finance think tank based out at Bangalore. So I think purity of time, because Naval has a very big profile. Let me stop here, and warm welcome to Naval, my dear friend. And I'm sure you will do excellent moderation of today's program. Warm welcome, Naval. Now over to you. So thank you so much once again. Before I hand over to Naval, thank you friends. I'm really delighted to have you on, all of you on the board. So now I'm over to my learned speakers, my minute speakers for 3-minute speakers, and my dynamic moderator, Naval. So I'm hand over to Naval. Looking forward a very enriching, exciting, knowledgeable, and I'm sure every one of us going to have a great bites of knowledge. I commit you next 1.5 hours would be a great insight for all of you. So over to Naval and my speakers. Thank you so much, friends. Thank you.
Thank you.
Over to Naval, please.
Thank you so much, Chetan. You've given such an energetic start to the whole discussion, and for setting up the tone of the show. Guys, please let me also introduce Chetan to the audience. He has done such wonderful introduction of the panel. Although majority of you know him, yet this is to perform the custom of the program that I introduce him. Chetan Thakkar, as we all know, is the convener of CAE Inner Circle group and our dear friend. He conceptualized this program with inspiration from Mr. S. Bhaskar, who is the Chief Audit Executive of Tata Capital. He's not attending today due to some exigency. However, Mr. Bhaskar has given his best wishes to all of us. Now, Chetan is a fellow chartered accountant, a certified internal auditor, a certified information system auditor, certified in risk management from ICAI, strategic leadership program from IIM Ahmedabad. He has also completed, and he has also done an EMBA from Harvard Management Mentor USA. The professional background is for Chetan is he's presently working with JSW Steel Limited as a general manager, group audit and risk management for cement, energy and mining verticals. He oversees audit of 13 different plants across India, and his immediate last stint was with Prism Cement Limited, Rajan Raheja's group, which is a $7 billion group. as a head management assurance, and also with Ambuja Cement as a corporate audit head. So he has a career, a shining career spanning over last 25 years. He has audited various large size listed companies, MNCs, banks, including banks, including SBI, ICICI, IDBI, Exim, Bank of Baroda, and whatnot. So I'm just not reading out the entire profile, but this would give you an idea about his expertise. I think with his sound understanding of various industries, we've been able to conceptualize this program. So thank you, Chetan, once again.
Thank you, Naval. Thank you for introduction. Warm welcome to all of you once again. Now over to Naval, please. Take it ahead the program.
Now, before we set on to this journey of learning for next 70 odd minutes, I would like to remember Lord Ganesh and Ma Saraswati to bless all of us here so that this discussion brings out some good learnings to all of us. Now let me set the rules of the game here, being the moderator. I request all of you to be on mute and keep your video off except for the panelists under discussions. You may kindly keep sending comments and questions in the chat box. I'll keep having look on that during the discussion, and I'll pick them up during the Q&A session also with faculties. At the end, towards the end of the discussion, we'll have a 15 to 20 minutes of Q&A, and I hope to get answers to majority of your questions there. If there are still some things pending, then we can also see how to address them later on. Friends, pharma industry, just like all others, is undergoing changes, and facing the immense challenge to provide humanity with the much needed and much waited for vaccine. As per a recent study, the pharmaceutical industry's long successful strategy of placing big bets on few molecules, promoting them heavily, and then turning them into blockbusters worked well for many years, but its research and development productivity has now plummeted, and the environment is changing. So 7 major trends, just to set the tone up, as I would see, is the instances of chronic disease are increasing, placing even greater pressure on already stretched healthcare budgets. The healthcare policymakers and payers are increasingly mandating what doctors can prescribe. So this will have a direct implication on the models, business models. A growing number of healthcare payers are measuring the pharma economic performance of different medicines. A widespread use of electronic medical records will give them the data they need to insist on outcomes-based pricing, and the boundaries between different forms of healthcare are blurring as clinical advances render previously fatal diseases chronic and the self-medication sector expands. There is one important thing that traditional medicine forms like Ayurveda is also expanding. And just to share with all of you, China, for example, had introduced traditional medicine in their medical professional courses, like the MBBS course equivalents that we have in India, like more than 15 or 20 years ago. And now their doctors in the current COVID situation, they are prescribing the traditional medicine also. So this is another trend that is impacting pharma companies. Governments are beginning to focus on prevention rather than treatment, although they have not yet invested very much in preventive measures. So with these trends, friends, I would like to now go to our esteemed panelists and start with, maybe I'll start with Seema. Seema, my question to you is, what are the most recent trends in pharma industry, especially the ones relevant to internal audit function? If you could share your wisdom with us. Seema?
Sorry, I was on mute. Good morning, Naval, and good morning, everyone. I would touch upon the trends in pharma, but along with that, in the current scenario and in this unprecedented times, the way we are working, I think there are few important emerging risks and trends that one need to consider. And few of them that I would like to highlight. One is from information technology perspective. The second one is from people and safety risk perspective. The third one, definitely, irrespective of industry, will be also the operations and R&D perspective. There are others that you are happening also in space of fraud risk, marketing, compliance, and supply chain. But I would like to focus my discussion on the IT, the people safety risk, and the operations quality risk. Now, coming in the environment where all of us are working from home, majority of us, so from an IT and a remote working system, what are the emerging risks that would impact every industry and even a pharma industry? One would be cybersecurity. The second would be the IT infrastructure. The third would be data privacy, confidentiality, and access management. These four are important risks that I see an internal audit have to focus on. In cyber security, the important ones could be one, all of us are aware on the phishing, wishing, and the smishing attacks that many of us are getting privy to. That is one area. The second is the malware attacks, and we have heard this across industry, various malware attacks that many industries and organizations are going through. That's one area. The third I would highlight in space of cybersecurity is the network and application level securities, that how are we ensuring the access of many applications that are there in the organization, the vulnerability analysis and pen testings, the periodic testings, the controls over all of this. This is one trend that I see across every industry from an audit or from an information security perspective. So both second line model of information security and the third line cyber security, internal audit has to focus on this. The other area with many organizations and in Indian industry, the data privacy law is yet to come, but for organizations where we have transactions in Europe with respect to GDPR, the controls over that, and in the current scenario, because everything is online, the leverage and these, I'll say the personal identifiable information system controls becomes very important, and the complete mechanism of governance mechanism of that is very imperative. The third element that I would want to highlight is the way we are working today. Access management is one area, because many of us today access a lot of data points from mobile devices, and many of us are working from home. So this unauthorized access is a challenge, and that is one area that internal audit should look into. The last area from a technology perspective is the information security area. From the way a leakage of an unpublished price sensitive information can happen because you're working from home, or the excessive usage of WhatsApp, that is one. So these are broadly from an information security. The second area I would want to highlight as a trend and an emerging risk is of safety, health and environment, which across, again, is applicable across industry, from the perspective of the spread of infection, the employees that who have traveled and come. So what are the measures that the management has taken in this regard? More from an HR perspective would be 2-3 things. One, the resource availability for our production and specifically the R&D facilities. Very clear work from home guidelines, as the organizations come up with very clear guidelines, and you can see nowadays all of us, we are working from morning till evening. Are there proper working hours? Is there a start time? Is there a break time? Are we respecting lunch time, or are we respecting the night time after office time? I think these are few guidelines. Even from an audit perspective, you can look and guide and help the management about. And the third area is definitely insurance, the COVID insurance, and I hope many organizations have already covered this for their employees from the perspective. The last, not taking much time, the last risk that I see emerging from a current perspective is in area of production. to ensure that there is a correct resource and there is a detailed planning in the current scenario where people are subject to COVID risk? How would you ensure that the planning, production planning is in place, and the impact of any change in production scheduling and way forward on the market? And from an R&D perspective, specifically for pharma, where we are also into CRO compliance and recruitment of the CRO trials, in this current scenario, that area also got impacted. So I will stop here, just keeping focus on these current trends has impacted not only the pharma, but I would say across every industry. And as a governance function, either you are part of risk compliance or audit, how are you ensuring that this part is taken care very well, and how are you partnering with the business to ensure that business is thriving in this current scenario? That's from my side, Naval.
Yeah, thank you, Seema, for your deliberation. I think you've raised some very interesting points. I would like to go to Tejas and ask him, Tejas, what are the trends in a mid to long term, especially the ones which are relevant to your compliance function? Tejas.
Thanks, Naval. So before I come to compliance trend, let's understand the expected trends in the healthcare industry. See, pharma is one of the critical component in end-to-end healthcare industry. So just for ease of understanding, let me start with one scenario. A scenario about how healthcare trend looks in future. So assume that there is a person X, a very fit and healthy person, regularly taking care of health, doing workout in gym, going for jogging, playing sports like tennis, cricket, etc. One day, what happened? The smart device he is wearing detected some abnormalities in the body. What that did, that smart device, based on insurance plan of that person X, sent that data to the insurance company. In the system automatically analyzed the data and detected what is wrong. Again, based on insurance plan, system recommended some diagnostic test and also facilitated person X for the appointment of such test. Person X went for those tests. Reports were sent digitally to the person X as well as back to the insurance company. System again, based on the outcome of diagnostic test, recommended few physicians on the panel for person X to choose one. Person X chose one of the physician for consultation. System again did facilitate the appointment. Person X went to the clinic and based on the consultation, in not much time, the required medicine, again as per insurance plans and based on recommendation from the physicians, delivered at the home step. So this happens and also till the person X is fit and healthy and back to normal, this cycle of periodic diagnostic test, physician consultation, and home delivery of medicine continues. So this is how the future of healthcare looks from particularly end customer perspective. So friends, what do you think? How long will it take to convert this scenario into reality? Any wild guess? What do you think? Maybe 2 years, 5 years, 10 years?
It is already reality.
Excellent. So maybe most of, because we being in pharma, we are aware, but most of you, if we are not aware, this is the today's reality. And with that, you'll see lot of digitization. One more trend which I can see in pharma is more and more consolidation, and not only consolidation among pharma companies, but all other and consolidation among all the players within healthcare. It could be pharma company, diagnostic test company, hospital chains, pharmacy chains, etc., etc. And what I foresee in future, um, more and more data, the control over data and market share would lie with fewer players, but that will help patients and end customers with point to point customized treatment through digital platforms. So this is what I see, a future trend of pharma and healthcare industry. Now coming to compliance, I see more and more stringent laws coming on compliance across the world, and you will see more and more increase in enforcement of such laws. Just to share, in India also we had a Prevention of Corruption Act got amended 2 years back. Earlier, onus was only on government officials for compliance, but today onus is on corporates and corporate officers also to comply with the requirement. And there is the enforcement visible in India as well, where the arrest has happened of private sector employees under Prevention of Corruption Act. So uh, that is one trend I see in future. Also, I'll see, because of more and more digitization, we also need to change our compliance processes and the controls and the how we depute compliance program, how we provide trainings to the end user. Simple example, because of this COVID situation, see, for most of the medical events or marketing events having a medical agenda or scientific agenda, the signed attendance sheet is very common document requirement. Now all the events since last 6 months are happening on digital platform. How will you collect signed attendance sheet? Not practically possible. Then would you ask mere Excel list of attendees? No, that is also not sufficient. All the digital platforms have a capability to provide system generated login logout reports, and that's the document we need in place of signed attendance sheet. So I was just trying to give example of change required quickly. So in future, the way business and industry change, compliance also, we need to evolve. We need to learn, unlearn, and adopt best practices very quickly. Uh, with digitization, I mean, let me give you one more recent example. I was just reading pharma news in US. Recently, one company launched, not launched, they developed, it's not yet launched, they developed COVID vaccine just in 48 days with support from artificial intelligence and machine learning. So all permutation combination from start to finish, just 48 days. Uh, so that's the power of data and digitization. So I foresee the way business change, also compliance would require change. Today probably we are looking at all high risk events. We are of course we are doing some analytics for selecting samples for monitoring, and today also some companies have also implemented a robust system to detect abnormalities and outliers as part of their day-to-day monitoring. So in future, I see a big role of artificial and intelligence, machine learning in business as well as in compliance world. So that's my submission for the future trends in business and compliance. Over to you, Naval.
Thank you, Chetan. Thank you, Tejas. I think you have in a very short span of time, you have highlighted all the key elements related to your function and related to the industry. Before we get into the further deeper details of what you and Seema have picked up, I would also like to invite Anisha and on her views on See, Anisha, I think we are all living and managing the enterprises now in a VUCA world, as they say, volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. Now, in this kind of scenario, what are the trends that you have observed for last 6 months, and where do you see them in future?
Uh, yes, sure, Naval. I totally agree with you. VUCA world it is, and especially in last 6 months, we have seen all that we have never even perceived or anticipated. The risks that are coming up are completely different than the risk that we are used to handling, or rather used to creating a transfer mechanism for, or insurance mechanism for. So it is a difficult time or a challenging time, I would say, for the risk persons and the management persons. If you look at it, I would say that the risk has undergone 360-degree change since the time that we have understood the risk. Maybe about 150 years ago, 180 years ago, the insurance or rather transfer of risk mechanism was evolved in a Lloyd's coffee house. So we might have to start looking at a new coffee house to understand the risk and to create a mechanism that would be available for a pharma company to get their risk transferred. It has always been pharma companies basically are always at the receiving end when the insurance companies are underwriting the risk. They have been unable to provide complete risk management solutions for insurance, for the pharma companies. So, and with the current scenario or VUCA world scenario, it has become all the more important for pharma companies to lay out the rules of the game and also believe in disciplines so that there is some control on risk and that residual risk is acceptable to the insurance company or a reinsurance company, I would rather say, because they play a very big role in getting the finance availability for transfer of risk. Now, when you look at the risk profile that we have perceived earlier, or the traditional risk that we have been underwriting through insurance, that is hardly consisting of about 10 to 15% of the risk that we would be looking at in future. The rest of the risk are mainly due to cybersecurity, as Seema was mentioning. There is a risk of global warming or climate change risk that we have not looked at it in past and that we would be looking at in future. Political risk, a $20 bill of George Floyd could create such a big havoc for the pharma industry, for the political scenario in US. And that is, if I can just mention the quantum of losses that the insurance industry has suffered because of that is to the tune of about $3,000 million. And that is not a small number. So all those risks that are evolving are applicable to pharma companies also. Because Indian pharma companies, if you look at, they are mainly having their footprints in the international market. More and more pharma companies are making their name in the international market. So they cannot be kept away from political risk. Then there is a data risk. Again, data risk is very, very crucial because the health industry has a certain data which was talking about certain communicable or non-communicable risk in past. And all the products that are available with the pharma companies are pertaining to those kind of ailments or treatment for those kind of ailments. We hardly have treatment or products for treating the pandemics like COVID. So all that data that has been there available in the past with us needs to undergo maybe a major change with the data of this pandemic. And the risk would have to be defined and it would be it would be converted into a proposal for the insurance company so that the appropriate solution for risk transfer can be designed. Then I would come to currency risk. Currency risk again is with a lot of fluctuation in oil prices and a lot of fluctuation in dollar values. There are so many risks that are emerging and creating loss kind of a scenario for pharma companies. These are, I'm not saying that are particularly for pharma companies, but majorly pharma companies can get impacted because of these kind of risk. And we need to have solutions. And the solutions that are available for currency risk handling or a political risk handling, they are not the kind of a full-fledged or a comprehensive scenario, or some comprehensive solutions that need to be looked into. Currency risk and the debt recovery. Again, the economies in today's world, because post-COVID scenario, now everything will be evaluated either on BC basis or PC basis. BC is before COVID and PC is going to be post-COVID. So all those scenarios that are emerging, or risk scenarios that are emerging, and maybe the scenarios that could be termed as black elephant, the term of black swan event and elephant assessment of risk, that can be combined, and the board would have to be looking at those risks and will have to try and create an ask. A comprehensive ask has to be created by the board or by the risk manager or the ERM committee, and that would have to be rolled out to the insurance company. That could be maybe it could be created. We could create a roadshow with the insurance company, and then insurance company or the reinsurance company can be convinced to allocate their capacities for transfer of this risk. If they see there is a risk management philosophy attached to this kind of ask, then the risk transfer mechanism could be easily derived, or else if there is no risk management, then the cost of risk could be so very high that it may become unviable to buy a solution for a transfer of risk. So there is a lot of constructive disruption is happening through the technology and digitization in the pharma company and also in the insurance space. Like Tejas mentioned, that the scenario of health solution delivered by the insurance company through artificial intelligence is one of the important aspects that is becoming a reality very soon, and it would be acceptable to the local public. But from my perspective, I feel the corporate risk is becoming more and more global, whereas the retail risk is becoming more and more local. So the solution cannot be a universal solution for these risks, and the insurance company and the pharma company would have to come across along on the same page and create a global risk scenario as well as create a local risk scenario. So that is what I think is my submission for the solution for VUCA world would be. Thank you, Naval.
Thank you, Anisha. I think you've covered everything, all the key risks comprehensively. And you also mentioned very interestingly about BC and PC before COVID and post-COVID. So interesting concept. You spoke about constructive disruption in happening in the industry. So with that, taking a lead from there, I would like to go to Seema now. Seema, and then maybe I'll come back to Anisha. Seema, what are the technology disruptions that are being observed in pharma sector? And do you think that health tech startups, they are complementing or are they challenging the existing players? What are the emerging risks and mitigation strategies from your point of view? Seema.
Okay. Thank you, Naval. I would, so the space, as Tejas started his question and Anisha complemented it, the space is very interesting space that is reality today. So what is happening in this health tech space? It is global across the world, but in India also we have many players and they are doing very well. From an health tech perspective, the startups like PharmEasy and MedLife, which have recently got merged, creating a valuation of $1.2 billion. Company like NetMeds recently got acquired by Reliance, and 1mgs. So all of these companies have derived their strength in the supply chain part and the distribution part of the drugs. That's one space the health tech companies are making their importance felt. The second area or the trend that I see in this space is companies like Practos, Librate, Mfines, and companies that are building their network in space of doctor strength, where they are working, building a network of doctors and taking on this journey. And there are many other players who have come. I don't want to name them. There are a number of players that are there. So what is happening in this space is the customer is at the center, the patient, I would say. And the unmet need of the patient is understood by the digital ecosystem, and the complete digital ecosystem is collaborating from a space in between doctor, from a space in between the patient who is the center, the connect of patient with the doctor, the connect of patient with the pharmacies or e-pharmacies, the connect of patient with the diagnostic center, the connect of patient to have those digital records. And over this value chain is what Tejas mentioned, the artificial intelligence and machine learning that is sitting over this and making it every day more and more intelligent, so that the customer service is at ease. The experience the patient comes by sitting at home, he can access the best of doctors. He can get his reports tested by sitting at home. People will come and take his diagnostics, take his samples of blood, whatever he would want to get tested for. E-pharmacies will come and deliver medicines to him at home. So this ease and convenience, getting various players collaborated in the digital ecosystem is a reality today. And this is a trend that is there with health startups. Now, an important question to ask here is, we all of us coming from pharma space or pharma industry space, how this would impact the pharma industry or the companies like Cipla, Dr. Reddy's, Glenmark, Sun Pharma, Lupin. So that's an interesting space to watch for. Definitely there would be more focus on the distribution side. Will it impact? Yes, it will impact. Is it a relevant journey? Yes, this is a relevant journey, and the disruption is there in the marketplace. So these are few thoughts I have on the table, and I hand over back to you, Naval, for any further questions.
Yeah, I think Seema, the key message from your side is it is a change we have to accept and we have to move forward along with it. We have to take it into our stride. Now with this, I would also like to ask the similar question to Anisha. And Anisha ji, if you can share your view on the same question related to technology disruption in health tech with health tech startups, and what is the importance of health tech in the research space, especially? This question has also been asked by one audience.
Navalji, thank you for asking a very, very interesting question. And this has been very, very close to my heart. So that I'm delighted to give a different answer. Or rather, I would take a little bit of Seema's input on this, and I would give my answer on this. You see, it is a compliment to be associated with a startup which is creating technical disruption. Why? All this while, most of the economies have been spending a lot of money on the healthcare. You may take US or you may take a developed country like any other country in the world. Their expenditure on healthcare is humongous. and lot of money is being allocated for that. Now, for that, pharma company has been, many pharma companies have been providing a lot of products all this while, and things have been happening. Now, with this technical disruptions, what they are aim to correct, or they aim to deliver, is some kind of a chronic management to the ailments that are troubling the world. Now, if the chronic ailment can be controlled, lot of expenditure that goes into managing the health through the hospitals can be controlled. Almost it is there is some kind of a uh, you know analysis that has been done, which says that almost 20 to 25% of the healthcare cost can be controlled if chronic health management is put in place for the population. Now, these startups are concentrating on catering to mainly 5 top ailments like cancer, cardio, respiratory, and things like that. So if they are able to succeed, they could be a complementing, uh, you know, business or a business model, which would be growing more and more pharma, because the concentration, the focus has been shifting from only health to wellness. And these startups, if they are able to succeed in creating that ecosystem, the wellness can be achieved for the population that is suffering from chronic illness. Now, if that is achieved, definitely there would be a growth. And I would give an example of a pandemic. We are looking at, vaccine getting distributed for what reason? So that we have the immunity, we have resistance to the ailment, we catch infections of COVID, and we can lead a simple life, and that is what is the aim of any economy. And that would even grow the economy. When we are looking at this kind of a scenario, I feel it is a complementing model to the pharma company, and they would be able to penetrate also in the markets which are not being catered to by a big pharma company. Like I would say maybe tier 2 cities, up to tier 2 cities, tier 3 cities, there's a lot of penetration for most of the pharma companies. But in the tier 4 or tier 5 cities, this kind of a penetration is not happened. And because of this not getting penetrated, they are subjected to some spurious or substandard medications that may cause more harm than provide health for those people. So I think more and more importance, or focus should be on those kind of delivery mechanisms, and they are the ones who would be able to bring some kind of a sanity in market, and it can drive economic growth. Insurance, I would say, insurance is working very hard, because as I mentioned to you, that there's a lot of claim ratio, which is important for insurance company. When they are providing a capacity of 100 rupees for health insurance business, they are paying out claims to the extent of 300% or 500%. And because of that, the regulator is also reprimanding them. If we have this kind of a mechanism followed, or if this mechanism is given more importance in future, especially after COVID is addressed, we would see that claim ratio also coming in control. And I foresee, this is my perception, that partnership with a partnership of a pharma company with insurance company can bring in lot many Amazon movement for the corporates, or for the corporates as well as for the insurance industry. So my 2 bit on this particular question of yours.
Yeah, thank you, Anisha. And I think you brought a very important aspect related to the distribution or the reachability of the medicines that are available, especially in the in the remote places of the country or of different markets that you are operating in. Uh, Taking cue from there, I would like to first go to Tejas and then come to both Seema and you for a 2 minutes, a quick comment on the counterfeit medicines. As per WHO has estimated that counterfeiting costs global pharma industry over 75 billion US dollars a year. So what are the best controls and compliance activities to counter this issue, and any comments relating to supply chain part of it? So maybe we start with Tejas and then come to Seema, and then on the closing remarks with Danisha. 2 minutes comment, please. Thank you.
Sure, Naval. So, see, counterfeit is a reality today, and it does not restrict only to pharma industry. I mean, the risk exists, and then there is no easy solution to this risk. We have to accept risk and work for risk mitigation. From technological perspective, some companies, not necessarily pharma, but including pharma, some companies have implemented some digital mechanisms like barcoding or any other technology to detect the genuine products. From compliance perspective, I feel we can have a strong whistleblower mechanism so that if anyone is making complaint, you get information if something is happening wrong, and if it comes to you for your action. And once you receive complaint, then maybe you need strong internal team, internal experts to deal with such counterfeit problem, maybe along with partnership with law enforcement agencies. One more mechanism from compliance perspective, maybe I can say, always engage in ethical. See, somewhere in counterfeit, somewhere your supply chain, some business partner within your end-to-end supply chain is involved. So having ethical business partners and to ensure how much the ethical practices your business partners have, there is a tool for ethical due diligence. So you can have, again, it's not foolproof solution. It is not pointing just for counterfeit, but it is more pointing towards having ethical, trusted business partners. Potentially such ethical, trusted business partners would not indulge into such wrong activities. So that's my quick submission on this matter.
Yeah, and Seema, your views on the same?
Yeah, I think Tejas has covered very well the barcoding and the ethical piece of it. I will just share a few from a control perspective or from an audit perspective. One, many of times pharma companies work with the partners and who are aware of this complete artwork and all the details from a quality perspective. I think from a control perspective, surprise visits, close monitoring of these partners will really help. The second thought as a control would be from a perspective of market complaints that you would get on these counterfeit drugs. What are the corrective actions and how have you ensured that controls that you have put in place is second area one can definitely look into. What we have also done in our organization is there is a program that we have built, we have merged along with serialization and barcoding, a program of marketing and supply chain together with the stockist. So this is a beautiful program wherein the stockist actually is happy or is he wins something. I would say like loyalty points or some points one would take in if you ensure that barcoding is there on each of these products. It's some way of ensuring a control is in place. The other controls I will definitely feel are you have a big field force that is there in the market. and this field force can randomly visit and check pharmacies, and the people on the ground actually make the journey very clear what's happening. So these people are also eyes and ears of the organization if something is happening in this regard. So these are few controls and any organization in this area can work on, build on. And this has to be a sustainable control process. It cannot be done once and left. There are teams which do it continuously, and we should ensure that this happens continuously by the organization.
Sure, Seema. I would now go to Anisha on the same question related to the counterfeiting of medicine. And I also, add one more point about availability of unbranded and generic pharma products launched by a lot of startups. Anisha ji, if you can share how the risk management can work for a pharma company on these two topics.
Sure, Navalji. I totally agree with what Tejas and Seema have mentioned about control and mitigate the risk of counterfeit medicines that are available or that are being pushed in the market. And there is a lot of thing that needs to be done to curtail this risk, because otherwise there could be more than health. We could have more of scenarios like product liability claim coming up on the actual manufacturer, because generally it is seen that these products have a very, very minor change in either the packaging or the labeling or the overall product. There's hardly any difference that we can understand from the visible view of the product. So a lot of control can be brought in by way of introducing artificial intelligence scenarios, like putting a barcode and creating this mechanism so that the risk is identified at the level of first sale, and it doesn't go into the interior of market. Then in the other control can be through the smartphones. We see a lot many advertisement nowadays that a payment of a payment of a transaction can be made without even a card. Debit card or a credit card is not required to make that transaction, and maybe a phone, smartphone can be used to make the payment for a transaction. Similarly, when the pharmacies are being bought, there could be a smartphone usage, and most of the 1mgs of the world or the NetMeds of the world are using this kind of a mechanism to see that the product is available, a right kind of a product or a proper product is available to the end user. With this kind of a implementation of a model, we could also control the risk. I mean, if there is a recall, God forbid the product is damaged and it needs to be recalled, then you actually know which particular stockist or which particular end user has bought this product, and that can be brought back for the destruction at a pharma company's end, or the warehouse where the product has to be brought back for destruction. So I think by implementation of this kind of initiative, we could control many of the risk, like spurious product risk can be controlled, recall risk can be controlled. And I would like to narrate, I'll just take 30 seconds on this. I would like to say that, pharma companies' employees are being given training on pharmacovigilance, so they are the ears and eyes of the company when this kind of product complaints are received, or complaints with regard to spurious products are received by the pharma company, and then that can be addressed accordingly. So my bit is that this risk is not been attended to in past to a great extent, and there's a lot more things that we need to do. Coming to the question of your question on generic drugs are available in the market, and I think it could be the way of life for tomorrow. And if they are appropriate drugs and they are at a cost, I mean, there is a cost benefit available to the end user, it would be picked up. So I think that could be another trend that is starting to control the health cost of at the end user space.
Just to add on Anisha's point, the generic drug trend is already there in US and Europe markets. But in India and in the emerging markets, this trend today is more branded. We are more, the doctors prescribes us branded drugs and not the generics. But I agree with Anisha. This definitely will pick up way forward. And companies have to become more productive and cost efficient to be in this space.
Yeah.
And I would also want to point out quality is very important. One has to ensure, one cannot think of leveraging or not respecting the quality piece of it. Quality is an important play in pharma space.
So
yeah, Seema, I think you made a very good complementing point to the points which Anisha had mentioned. Could you also elaborate a little bit on specific to your function, how the internal audit has changed in the current context?
Sure. Thank you, Naval. This is an interesting question. Today, in the context when this COVID started and when business was thriving to go and ensure that they are meeting their objectives of the organization, an important question I asked myself and many of my colleagues here might have asked in this journey, how we will make ourselves first thing very relevant, and what is that we have to do in the organization that we can help them on. So I would want to mention here few of the important changes and journey as a team, as Dr. Reddy's internal audit team, that we learned and we imbibed on. One, while this COVID was on, this team went on to understand and partner with business. What are the emerging risks that could happen and how are you controlling them? That is one area that it was very satisfactory, satisfaction that I could derive, that yes, we are supporting the business and ensuring that something should not go wrong for them. Asking them what could go wrong for you. We were not auditing them, but just asking them what could go wrong and is this could go wrong, and how are you ensuring that there are controls regarding this. This is one insight that I would want to share. From an audit perspective, there are a few things that I changed within for my team and agreed with the audit committee and the audit committee chair that I would want to share here. One, from a governance perspective, we said we will more focus on digital audits, cybersecurity audits, GDPR audits, ITGC audits, bot assurance program. This is our focus from an audit perspective. The second change from governance perspective, we have started this journey. We also told and agreed with our stakeholders, with our CXOs, that for few of the digital transformation initiative projects, internal audit will have a seat on that projects, and before the project getting launched, internal audit validation or internal audit yes or a go ahead, that interlocks are in place and they in an integrated module, the integration is happened. That is where internal audit will come and say yes, we have doing, and a project will launch way forward. That is, I would say, digital, a seat on digital initiatives. That's one area. The third thing I want to highlight more from a perspective of agility. Two changes I got in my approach in agility space. One, we made our audit plan flexible. I agreed with our CXOs and the audit committee that an audit plan cannot be fixed in this current scenario. We will be flexible. We agreed a percentage ratio. This will be fixed, and this give me a leeway. Any important audits, any changes, understanding the current risks. If something I have to audit, I will get into those areas. That's one change. The second change from agility perspective is the way we would partner every quarter with key stakeholders to understand what are the risks that are going and audit them and come to them immediately. It's not that I have to follow a rule protocol and then come with a final report. Something high risk, it's an immediate call to the person and we discuss on the table. That's one thing. The last thing I would want to highlight is we have, I will say, married with digital technologies. In space of continuous control mechanism or in space of your ITGC, IT application control, or in space of MRC controls, we want to go very deep dive. We have initiated this journey. The complete digital audit journey has got initiated for us, and we are working ahead. And the future we look forward is a central team that can monitor those red flags, and we will be doing a lot of advising on assurance activities. That's the changes, few changes, Naval and team here that we got in the internal audit space.
Yeah, they're very interesting, Seema, and I think some of them are actually transversal to various industries. Like you spoke about partnering with your management, being available, asking them questions, interacting and understanding them. I think that will be applicable across industries beyond pharma also. And the second important thing that you mentioned was, adopting technology. I think that is also something which is applicable across industries. So thank you very much for that. Tejas, may I come to you now? And I would like to know from you. See, you have been an internal auditor, and then you have, transformed to a compliance officer, looking at ethics and compliance of your company. What are the things that you would like to share based on your experience with the community, auditing community over here, as well as the compliance community? And also, if you could add few more pointers on the recent trends in the compliance functions in the industry. Over to you, Tejas.
Sure. So, so recent trend, let me tell you, particularly compliance would differ in pharma as compared to other industry, and I'll tell you why. If you see a corruption risk, it is more relevant. What are the interfaces where there is a high risk of corruption? Primarily two. One is government officials and other is customers. But in pharma, there is another third bigger stakeholder, and which is a healthcare community. So it is healthcare community includes healthcare professionals as well as healthcare organization, and hence you will see. And then for us, people in pharma compliance, see internally also there are a lot of stakeholders. So so I think 90% of the pharma company staff interact with healthcare community, as compared to maybe less than 10% staff in any other industry who interacts with government officers. So we have to manage larger stakeholders within the company. Also, we have to oversee and monitor the bulk volume of transactions, which we perceive as a high risk transactions, and continues monitor them or audit them. So I see a trend in future, more and more compliance function will evolve in the pharma industry. There would be more and more demand in a pharma compliance space, and that way I have a recommendation for internal audit colleagues here, that it is a good, if you are interested and you have some passion towards compliance, it is a good area to expand your existing role beyond internal audit. In fact, that's how I started my journey into compliance. My initial 15 years of I have a total 15 years of experience in internal audit and related areas, and 7 years of experience in compliance. And in between 3 years, it was the overlap period where I was managing both the rules. So in a small company, to begin with, many companies I have seen, the role of internal audit and compliance is merged into one person at senior level. So that's my experience. Uh, in 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 terms of relation between two function, I can say that both are complementary to each other. If you see the skill set of pharma compliance team or internal audit team, or for that matter any industry, both teams are expert in risk controls, process, and documentation. uh, we rely on each other in terms of sharing knowledge, uh, exchanging documentation, like internal audit reports or monitoring outcome or investigation reports. Uh, we we as a compliance team, we do take some of the internal audit findings for improvement in our compliance program, policies, training modules. Uh, Also, in some, largely the investigation is part of compliance function, but very few companies also have this function as part of internal audit team. This is, I would say, both functions are complementary to each other. uh, and in future, as Seema and Anisha also said earlier, be it internal audit function or compliance function, we need to have a strong skill set in digital space and latest digital technologies and application of such latest digital technologies into our day-to-day function. So 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 like internal audit experts can always relate to this example. Earlier there was a uh, checklist approach where you select samples, and against sample was selected based on random basis. Then there was a angle came where post data analytics specific samples was started being selected for internal audit. Then there is a heavy involvement of data analytics in the internal audit program, where there was like to finding out the outliers or exceptions or finding the trends, and considering those outputs into the selection, into the audit methodology and audit approach. And today some of the companies within India also have a latest artificial intelligence and machine learning embedded in their internal audit program. So this is the evolvement of internal audit maybe in last 15-20 years. Similarly, in compliance also there is a big evolvement in last 10-15 years, in terms of more and more area coming under compliance scope. There is a team expansion, and more resources are deployed within the compliance department. More and more technologies and tools are being available to the compliance team. Uh, and this trend will continue in future. Uh, so this is my submission. Just to add, of course, I spoke about future trend. I think recently also it would be interested for some of the people to know how it is impacting because of COVID pandemic. So Naval, you want me to cover that piece also? Or
Yeah, you can go on. So I was anyways planning to ask you later, but you can continue.
yeah, so I would say, to summarize quickly, see, I have observed good impact as well as bad impact because of COVID. A good impact I see, again, it's my personal view, I see a forced digitization. Many people in company who believe in papers, physical signature, face-to-face meetings. So I would say Generation X is forced to embed themselves in the working style of millennial generation of working style. So that's the, I see personally, as a very positive change. From business perspective also, marketing team 100% focus is now on core medical and educational activities, and that way there is a reduction in the compliance risk. uh, of course, initially we faced a challenge. It was a new experience for business team as well as compliance team. So we struggled initially to tweak our existing process and documentation requirement uh, for for initial digital events. But then after few events, I think journey is better as compared to physical event days, and it's very much smooth now. At the same time, I've also faced a lot of challenge. I mean, one bigger challenge I'm sure all auditors would have also faced, generating bulky data from SAP and downloading at on the low internet bandwidth at home. So, and generally we use that, we need data for monitoring and investigation purpose. So it is bigger operational challenge. And I would also add here, while relating my experience for investigation. See, I mean, no one has thought we could do interviews for investigation on a through video conference. The historic practice, I'm sure you all agree, there was a practice of flying to the location wherever it is in the any corner of the world for conducting investigation interviews. Now we are forced to take such interviews digitally. So there are many challenges, and I'm not comfortable with the current approach in this one space, because there are network issues sometimes where you need to tell interviewee to stop the video. Uh, all of us on the panel are surrounded by family members, and there is always a high risk of leaking confidential information. Uh, and you don't know, interviewee may be recording this conversation, which is very much possible with this today's technology, and you don't have any control on that. You cannot guess the interviewee's body language or facial expressions. So this is one area where I'm not much comfortable. But otherwise, this digitization is helped in improving of compliance overall status. Thanks, Naval.
Yeah, thanks, Tejas. And I completely agree with you when you say, when you make a point on the interviews, because one of the key points of the interview is also to, put the other person in pressure and then to see how he reacts. But on a distant mode, I don't think it would work that effectively. Okay, now let me go to Anisha ji. I'll ask one question to Anisha and one more question to any of you panelists before we get into the Q&A round. I'm conscious on time. So with the permission of the audience, I would like to extend this meeting by another 15 minutes because a lot of interesting stuff is going on. So let me go to Anisha. Anisha, what are the latest trends in insurance space? Do you think that health insurance and professional liability insurance are in for a big change, and how should the corporate sector prepare for the same?
Yes, Navalji, agree. I would just like to talk about professional liability insurance first, because health startups and health related changes, we have already spoken about it in little earlier conversation. So we have just received some communication or some information in the social media that one of the big fours have been slapped with a big fine to the extent of about $50 million. Now, that is not a small number. And why? Because there were some irregularities that were that happened in 10 years ago, and the regulator has found out that the professionals who had been the key drivers to this particular merger or acquisition have not given appropriate advice. They have made some wrongful declarations, and some professional ambiguities are being found out by the key stakeholders, main key stakeholders of this transaction. So what has gone wrong? There seems to be a clear case of professional advice going wrong, or there is a negligence in giving a professional advice. So how do you protect yourself from these kind of liabilities being put on you? That could be done through a professional liability insurance. That liability can be transferred to insurance company if there is a appropriate due diligence that is required to be done, has been done, and post that insurance companies are conducive to write that kind of a business for the organizations which are dealing in giving professional advice. Now, this professional liability insurance is very, very important for all the professionals that we are having today. It is not necessarily that only pharma companies would have this kind of a liability. People who are, engineers or accountants or chartered accountants or any other professional who's into giving consultancy services, and that consultancy services could go wrong because the risk scenario, or the scenario that controls the risk or mitigates the risk is changed, and that is not being taken into account. So those scenarios can be taken care by professional liability insurance. And with regard to health insurance, I would say that mainly chronic management control, patient support programs are being rolled out through the health startups, and these kind of initiatives would be able to control risk which are prevailing in the market, or which we may see in coming future with regard for the risk transfer mechanism. So professional liability insurance becomes very, very critical. All the risk managers, as an individual risk managers, they would be getting a support. Like for doctors, there is a medical malpractices insurance available. Many of the pharma companies are providing that support to the doctors. So, and in recent past, we have seen some news that pharma companies are trying to create clinics for the doctors. Because of the COVID scenario, people are not able to visit clinics, doctors' clinics. So virtual clinics are being set up. In this kind of a scenario, there is a possibility that there is a, as Tejas mentioned, that some patient can record the advices that are being given by the doctor, and there could be a future liability scenario that can arise. To control all these risks, it includes cyber risk, it includes data risk, it includes negligence in giving professional advice, all these kind of risks that can be covered through this policy. So I think there is a clear opportunity for the insurance companies to help pharma companies and the stakeholders, pharma stakeholders, to have a appropriate protection.
Yeah, thank you, Anisha. So before we go to the audience, one question to Seema, a very specific one on audit, which has, I think, also come in the audience chat box, but we were anyways planning to ask you, related to the inventory taking, because it's something, some process which is actually very important on the pharma industry side. How has the current situation impacted this, and how have the companies coped with the inventory thing? Seema, very quick.
So yeah, this is a very good question, and we face this with our statutory auditors also. While our March books were getting closed, one of the important questions when our audit committee dates were also getting finalized, we already had a date, and statutory auditors were very particular. Without inventory, we will not, physical valuation of inventory, we will not go ahead. So this whole process, what we have done, we have tied up with a third party. They are also auditors, and we have done everything on video. We called our warehouse people. We scheduled respective dates for each plant and warehouse, and called the respective warehouse teams. We requested our third-party auditors to go and visit that place. We got them specific approvals, because this was the time when lockdown was on. and we have done everything using the video technology. This is the approach that got followed, and many companies have followed this approach.
Yeah, the same applied to my organization as well, Seema. So thank you very
Yeah.
much. Now we are going to take some questions from the audience. Let me pick up the last one which have been received, and maybe I want to address this to Tejash. How internal audit functions, or maybe to Seema, any of you actually, how internal audit functions are equipped to provide the assurance against regulatory risk and assurance on production and quality process in operations. I think there are multiple people who have asked the same question. So maybe Seema, if you could start, yeah.
I would request Tejas to answer, because the person who asked is my team member.
Ah, okay.
Okay,
He
sure.
may get a reply what I speak in office. So
Okay, sure.
if anything, I'll compliment you, Tejas.
No,
So
no problem.
Ganesh is part of my team. And then,
Sure. So let me attempt. See, these technical areas like US FDA compliance, or in general, let's call it as a quality compliance, we have or generally most of the pharma companies have a strong quality team who do day-to-day quality checks on the medicines at all the level, at raw material level, at work in progress level, semi-finished goods level, at finished goods level, even after it is packed. So quality check is there at every interval in the whole process of receipt of material till dispatch of finished goods. And on top of that, quality team also have a quality audit team. So like we have an internal audit team, most of the pharma companies have a quality audit team within the quality department. And that team role is to visit every manufacturing site of pharma company on rotation basis, on periodic basis, and do the audit of quality documentation. So in my last 12 years of dedicated pharma career, I have not seen where internal audit team is doing audit of quality function uh, because of having a strong quality audit team internally. But practice may vary from pharma company to pharma company. So and on top of that, there are regulators audit coming every now and then. So generally, typically one manufacturing plant is registered and compliant not only for the compliance requirement of one country but for many countries. So typically one good manufacturing plant would be US FDA compliant, MHRA compliant, TGA compliant. So periodically European agency compliant. Typically these agencies would also keep coming. So maybe once a year, one regulatory agency will come and do the audit. So that way, quality is a key in any pharma company, and we have a robust quality program as well as quality audit program. So I think that's my submission here. Maybe Seema can add if she has any additional comment to add.
So I think it is this is very specific to the company and to the tone that top management would drive. So I understand the context why Ganesh is asking this question, to understand more from how other companies are doing this. But to add, in Dr. Reddy's, we audit quality function. We even we go to plants and audit complete quality processes. And the central quality audit team is part of second line of model as per the IAA 3 lines model. And as per our audit plan, we even audit the second line model. The reason maybe the thought process we carry is this is an important risk for an organization. And it becomes very relevant. Any non-compliance of an FDA really impacts in a big way to a pharma company. So we have specialists in our team. One of them definitely here on the is Ganesh. And there are various other specialists we have in the team who have worked in manufacturing, production and quality and are part of internal audit team.
Yeah.
So they help us to do this.
So maybe Anisha ji, you would also like to add something for your company?
Yeah, definitely. I would like to add to what Tejas and Seema have mentioned, that if from insurance point of view, if I say that if these two functions behave, or they are able to bring in the superior product or a superior experience, then the insurance managers, risk managers' job becomes very, very easy. And this kind of controls or the kind of expertise will bring down the cost of risk transfer for any company, not only pharma company. More so for pharma company, because we are a highly regulated industry, and if there is a lapse, then there is a chance of product being rejected and being recalled, or there is a chance of product liability claims can arise. So if these two functions are able to bring in the delight factor for the insurance manager, then the cost of risk can be controlled, can be reduced drastically, and it could definitely be impacted on EBITDA. So it is the core function of risk control, or through risk identification, is the main aspect which risk managers would always look for. And with the support of compliance and the risk audit function, this can be achieved. This can be very well achieved. And that is what we practice in Cipla.
Yeah, Anisha, I think with the answers from all three of you, it gives a 360 view, a 360-degree view to the audience on this specific question in terms of audit, risk, and compliance. I would also add one more thing from my side. From a company's law perspective, internal auditor needs to give the assurance to the board and the audit committee. So now the scope, functioning, methodology as per the law has to be defined by them. And there is a concept of assurance map that I have implemented in my organizations wherever I work, and where we have tried to list down what are all the activities that need assurance for the board or audit committee. And wherever, if there are any items which are not covered by the internal auditors, then we can specifically report that, okay, if I am not covering it, but maybe someone else is covering it. For example, we used to have, in my previous company, Honda, we used to have a research and development a separate section, which was part of the balance sheet and the profit and loss account of the company. But they were being audited directly by our Japan colleagues. So we reported it accordingly. And I think that's it. So the answer lies in what your board wants, what your audit committee wants. But yes, internal auditor has to give a comprehensive view to the board for sure. And in case they are not able to give it, it must be clearly highlighted and pointed out in the board. It should not be a black box. So now coming to the other audience questions, I think we have a question from Dubai. Maybe Seema, I'll address that to you. The question says, there are new expectations of management or board from internal audit in current scenario, especially in current scenario where ownership of some process has also been, is also being added to IA portfolio. So any comments on that from your side?
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Naval. So in the current scenario, I think as Naval pointed out, that the board expects an assurance from the internal audit head. And what is this assurance all about is whether the controls are adequate and are operating effectively. So what one has to do in the current scenario, what I understand and the way I do it in the organization is, we need to partner with the business guys. Once we partner with them, we speak to them continuously to understand the changes that they are doing to their business model. So today in pharma space, as Tejas was pointing out, meeting a doctor also has become, you're doing it digitally, maybe a little bit physically. So a new term has coined called phygital, which means little physical, but also digital. So how in this process change, how is that I as an internal auditor will do the audit and agree with them the approach? I think these kind of conversations are very, very important. So I would request the internal audit heads at least to join all the business review meetings, the quarterly review meetings, the business review meetings, the CFO reviews, because this throws a lot of nuances, changes, what the future will be, what the current is happening. Partnership with all of these stakeholders will make you think how you need to change your processes in an internal audit, and how you can play a little bit advisory role or a consulting role on the assurance, because you have got that experience over the universe of the organization. No one has that experience in the organization, that you know the universe, you audit every area. So that expertise marrying with business needs will really help you out.
Yeah,
Thank you,
absolutely.
Naval.
Fair point, Seema. And just to quickly add to what you said, the most important part is, again, the trust with the management, and that gets built over a period of time. It doesn't come with a title or with a position. It comes with the value add that you create over a period of time. You keep engaging with people, you solve their problems, you give advice on various platforms, slowly. Even if right now you are not part of the management committee meeting or those important meetings, you will be included. But that will not happen only because you are a chief audit executive or someone else. That will happen because they see value in spending time with you. With that note, now I would like to go to Tejas and ask a very interesting question which has been asked to us by one research analyst who has joined this meeting. Tejas, the question is how and what to track accounting malpractices in pharma companies from forensic analysis point of view. And he would like to, actually ask it specifically from the pharma sector perspective and not a generic one. Over to you,
Sure,
Tejas.
sure. So, see, these fraudsters are are always one step ahead than the control functions. And particularly if they are internal employees, they have mastered the art of managing compliance with internal policies and documentation requirement. So as the control functions, you
That is
need
why
to
we
be.
say creative accounting.
Yes, that's true. So you need to be one step ahead. Simple review of documentation for a particular transaction on a standalone basis would not help. You need to do data analytics, look at the trend, look at the outliers, uh, look at do the volume analysis. So look at the data from holistic perspective, and then you'll be able to find red flags. And then if you deep dive into the documentation, not just looking at one single transaction, but collectively all the transaction which triggers the red flag, then you will come to know what is happening in a wrong way. So this is very general approach, but and then in pharma industry, and along with that, I always insist on strong whistleblower mechanism, because, and also you need to demonstrate that the complaints you are getting, you are taking it seriously, and you are investigating the matter thoroughly, and then that results outcome of that investigations percolate into necessary actions within the company, and that's how you build trust, so that employees and business partners can freely, without any hesitation and with trust, will reach out to you with any wrong practices happening. So this is, again, I'm sorry, but this is again a generic answer which will apply to any industry. But these are two, I mean, the good whistleblower mechanism and action on the complaints and the holistic data analytics is two very generic answer. And there could be, I mean, this is the way I personally feel we should deal with such frauds or potential frauds on proactive basis. But there are separate nuances in pharma industries where are very industry specific. But to tackle those nuances and potential frauds or actual frauds or perceived frauds, the ways to tackle that are very common and very industry neutral.
Yeah, Tejas, maybe the audience was looking for an answer relating to some tools or some specific data analysis that you would be doing to catch hold of some of these red flags.
So my submission here is, see, there are multiple tools I mean, of course, at the end, I will recommend which I have used. But more important than tool is you need a right skill set within the company who can make best use of that tool. So who understand the data structure, who has the ability to connect the dots, who who have basic knowledge on writing queries based on data structure to derive the meaningful data from the big databases. Some of the tools which I have used is maybe I can name two. Of course, I can name three. Definitely Excel, which is used by, I'm sure, all of you who are on this call. In addition to Excel, I've used Microsoft Access and also IDEA Analytics tool. So these three tools largely I have used personally for data analytics. But as such, as I said, there are multiple good tools available. More important, you need a right skill set who can extract best out of such tools. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Tejas. And just to add to what you said, there are different kind of data analysis techniques that are available, which one can read about and can be applied using the tools that Tejas mentioned, and you can see how the data is trending up. Now, being conscious of time, just one last question, which is a little, aside from the league, which has been asked by the audience is to both of the women leaders over here in the panel. First of all, I would like to ask this to Seema and then to Anisha ji. In spite of many odds, how you have been able to reach your current leadership position, and what perspective you have believed the most in you? This has been asked by a young lady professional. Maybe they need your guidance. Over to you, Seema.
Thank you. The question is inspiring, and thank you for this question.
Sorry, but I would say very good question.
Thank you. To the position, I never thought actually about positions or the roles. I think as a person, what is individually required is to build on your skills and capabilities. Your roles and designations will follow. And it is natural, the way I believe is every human being has his or her story to speak on. And every person goes through their set of challenges. For some, the challenges are high. For some, the challenges are less. As you grow and mature, what I believed is, one, are you self-aware? What is happening within you is very important. Once you understand that what you are, what are your positives, what are your strengths, and what are your weaknesses, if you're able to identify them, that is one area every leader or a person who wants to be a leader has to work for. The second area is, am I accepting what is happening? That is equally important. Once I am aware and accepting, I'm ready for change, for my steps to become a better person, to become a better individual, and naturally a better leader. So this is what I believed in, and I would request the young team to believe in yourself, work on your skills, work on your capabilities. Once you do that and be focused on them, that is what I learned, and I follow till today. And I think roles will follow, promotions, roles, money, everything comes later. They follow. Once you are a capable person, you have niche skills and the knowledge to take that forward, everything comes naturally. This is my thought process and my focus towards life. Always be continuously learning. I have been learning and I still learn today, and I do some courses. I'm continuously learning. I think that's one, everyone, many of you may be doing it, but that's one I think people should do every time. So these are few things. Happy to support individually anyone. Anyhow, from IIA Women's Forum, I have been given responsibility of mentoring and coaching. I will come out with the detailed module and section regarding that. Thank you. Thank you,
Very
Naval.
nice to learn that, Seema, that you are working on empowerment of women, and we'll be happy to support you wherever.
Yes, yes. Certainly, yes.
And
Thank
Anisha
you.
ji, I think if you could also share your wisdom with the young professionals.
Definitely. I totally agree with Seema when she said that you keep on learning, and learning as in not only with regard to the subject that you are working on, but learn about the life, be empathetic and be open with the support of your family, friends, that you always have to see that you are with them and they are with you. Because for any steps that you may climb in life, you don't want to be alone at the top. You want to be with your family, you want to be with your friends, and you want to be with your colleagues, you want to be with your team. So that is the motto of life that I feel one should follow, and I have followed that. I am always, trying to be agile and resilient, so that whatever changes that are coming in, and whatever challenges that are coming in, because we saw many challenges in life, and those life challenges, you should not sit back and cry about it. If you just try and fight those challenges, because as a woman, sometimes you are, you are considered to be a, a person who's weaker, and that should not be your argument to not to succeed. So if you can be if you can reposition yourself, you can be agile, you can be empathetic, I think anyone can reach at a good position in life. And position in life is not as important as being together in life with people, because the aim of life is different than achieving positions. So if you are remembered as a kind person, if you are remembered as a helpful person, I think most of the things can follow. And as Amir Khan says in Three Idiots, you concentrate on your expertise, success will follow. So
Fantastic. Fantastic.
Absolutely right. So,
Thank you.
Anisha ji, the one word, if I have to summarize your entire message in one word, is gratitude and be a good human being. So, with that note, I would like to go back to my friend Chetan Thakkar and present a vote of thanks and summarize the meeting. Chetan ji.
Thank you, Naval. Thank you so much. And thank you to my all four speakers, moderator. It was a quite insightful session. And a big thank you to my all participants for the patient hearing. I would not really take a great time between you and your lunch. I know we are overshooting on time. I will just quickly summarize some of the important areas were discussed by our thought leader today. Some of the key areas we discussed, we talked about COVID insurance, which is a buzzword in West European country and coming to India now. Then we talk about the technology disruption, which is playing a role, AI, ML, which is a disruption in the pharma industry in a larger way. Then we talked about health tech small startups. We need to introspect whether it is complementing, whether it is supplementing, or it is competing with us. So we need to introspect that, each and every farmer. And the most important top 5 risk in the pharma we talked about, counterfeit of medicine. And I think Anisha ji has said there is a market of 75 billion US dollar. Yes, guys, you heard it right. It is 75 billion US dollar is a counterfeit market, which is one of the top 5 risks. And importantly, very nicely contributed by Tejas and Seema, saying that what could be the mitigation plan? Should we have a barcode as a preventive control? Or should we do a surprise visit? Or should we get the tea from a complaint? How are we able to mitigate that? Because that is a very agile inherent risk. But still, how best we can able to mitigate those risks? Then we talked about, I think Seema has very nicely talked about agility. What we need is a need of the hour, the way she has handled a Dr. Reddy, how the audit plans are made it flexible, 70-30, how the focus area has been changed to digitalization, GDPR, ITGC, cyber issues, how they initiated digitalization, how they done the integration of the assurance function with the other function to have a process redundancy to be more out of the system. So that's how agility has been taken care in the Dr. AD. Then we talked about Tejas has talked to us. So there are various steps in investigation, and the most difficult is doing an interview, which is a difficult phase in any forensic investigation, and how that is being taken care by Tejas in Glenmark. He shared his insights on that. That's a really wonderful, Tejas. And then I think Anisha ji has very nicely talked to us about the professional liability insurance, product insurance. What are the risks? What are the risks? Because right now everything is happening online, remote environment. What are the cyber risks we are coming in the way? The kind of negligence risks on the part of doctors while advising, because you are not meeting them physically. Everything happening digital in this pandemic. So I think it is very difficult. So this professional liability and the product insurance become a really key integral part of the role in the pharma company. And I think Seema has also very rightly explained us how in this pandemic she has handled the PV of the statute, PV of the inventories, which is lying at the various factory location, how they have done the process. They use the third parties, use the technology, some have used the drones, and how they convince the management and the statute auditor in this given pandemic, a different way of doing things, which traditionally we were doing all this time PV, and again a different set of approach to do PV. And with this small summary, because as I told you, I don't want to come in between you and your lunch. So a very big thank you to all my participants, a big thank you to my learned, my thought leader from a large industry from pharma. I was thankful to you. I look forward many more such insightful session in future. And friends, since it was a restriction on the part of the participants, we will share the recording with you guys. My friend Naval, who is a tech savvy, he will be able to help all of us of the recording of the session. So the participant who missed that, I'm sure he will make available to all of us. So thanks, friends. See you all till time we meet again.
Let's have a clapping for all the audience.
So thank you, friends. We see you all till time we meet again. Thank you so much.
Chetan to Naval as well.
Yes,
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. It was a great session and a great learning. I'm sure my participant would have definitely taken a beat of the knowledge while they were leaving all of us. So thank you, everybody. So I'm formally announcing the closure of the session. Thanks once again for making this a very grand, intellectual, engaging session. Thank you so much. Okay. Namaskar.
Namaskar.
Namaskar. Thank you. I'm formally closing the session now. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Thank you.